He came to Harbor Point on a quiet evening. The kind of evening where the sea whispers more truth than people do. A lonely man with tired eyes and a back marked by scars life never apologized for. His name was Ethan Cole, and on that first night, God placed him where he needed him to be, right beside three young women, three sisters standing so close to danger. Yet they had no idea how dark the tide beneath their feet truly was. Hannah, the gentle one, always caring more than she said. Lily, the tender soul, dreaming through music because it hurt to dream any other way. And Veronica, bold, beautiful, walking a thin line between hope and temptation. They were not meant to face what was coming. A powerful man had already written their names into a plan built on greed and set to ignite like a spark lost in gasoline. But the Lord sends help in unexpected shapes. Sometimes it's not an angel, but a quiet man with calloused hands, a wounded heart, and the courage to protect what isn't his to lose. Before we begin, may I ask, where are you watching from tonight? Let us see how far this story of faith, justice, and God's gentle protection can travel. The summer sun hung low over Harbor Point, casting a warm gold glow across the boardwalk. Seagulls dipped through the salty breeze, children ran with dripping ice cream cones, and the small coastal town buzzed with the restless excitement of tourist season. The water shimmered like scattered coins beneath the morning light, and every tugboat, yacht, and fishing vessel rocked gently as if waking from sleep. Harbor Point looked peaceful that morning, but peace was rarely honest. Brooks by the Bay. The wooden sign creaked softly as Hannah Brooks unlocked the restaurant's side door. The building had once belonged to her late father, an ex-Navy cook who'd built the place plank by plank, so every hinge and nail carried memory. Hannah Brooks, 29, had soft brown hair tied in a low ponytail and warm green eyes that carried both kindness and exhaustion. She was slender, not because she followed a diet, but because she never remembered to eat during lunch rush. Known throughout town as dependable and gentle, Hannah had one flaw. She took care of everyone except herself. After her father died suddenly 3 years ago, that sense of responsibility hardened into quiet burden. It made her older than her years, but strangely stronger too. She stepped onto the back deck, watching a group of dockhands unload seafood. "Morning, everyone," she called. "Morning, Hannah." They waved back, those who still worked for her. Many had left after the Whitmore Corporation began buying every shoreline property they could. Hannah's restaurant sat on prime waterfront territory, and the pressure was heavy. She sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. Inside, the bell chimed lightly as the next person arrived. Lily Brooks, 22, was the middle sister, blonde, sweet-faced, with blue eyes that sparkled like tide pools when she smiled. Petite and soft-spoken, she carried her guitar everywhere, calling it the safest place for my thoughts. Lily was the type who apologized when someone bumped into her. Her gentle nature made people feel at ease, but it also meant she bruised easily, emotionally more than physically. After a messy breakup last year, she'd convinced herself she wasn't brave. She was wrong, but she didn't know that yet. "Hannah, we're almost out of crab," Lily said. "Should I run by the docks later?" "Yeah, after the lunch rush." Lily nodded, strumming a few soft chords as she gazed out toward the water. She always seemed half-rooted in the real world and half-floating somewhere musical. Moments later, the third sister arrived. heels clicking sharply across the wooden floor. Veronica Brooks, 25, was everything Lily wasn't. Tall, striking, and effortlessly glamorous, she had rich dark hair, arched eyebrows, and a smile that could charm or cut depending on her mood. She dressed like she was headed to a magazine shoot, not a seafood restaurant. Veronica carried herself like the world owed her something, and maybe it did, considering the childhood she fought through. She'd been bullied mercilessly for her appearance when she was younger, back before braces, makeup, and confidence reshaped her into Harbor Point's resident beauty queen. The wounds of that time never fully healed. They calcified into ambition. "Quick update," Veronica said, tossing her bag onto a chair. Grant Whitmore's assistant called again. "They want another meeting." Hannah stiffened. "We're not selling." "You say that," Veronica shrugged, "but they're not going away." Before Hannah could respond, the restaurant door opened again, this time from the front. A shadow fell across the sunlit entrance. A tall man stepped inside. The conversation died instantly. He wore a black sleeveless shirt stretched across a sculpted chest, showing an unmistakable six-pack and arms roped with muscle. A faded baseball cap hid most of his face, but even from a distance, his jawline looked sharp enough to cut rope. His jeans were worn, his boots dusty with road dirt, and a weather-beaten duffel hung off one shoulder. He looked like someone who didn't stay anywhere long. He also looked like someone you didn't want to fight. He paused at the doorway, scanning the room, and then he walked straight toward Hannah. "Looking for work?" Hannah asked cautiously. The man nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Dock work, mechanical work, anything with boats," he said in a low, gravel-warm voice. Up close now, his face became clearer, bluish-gray eyes, a scar running along his left shoulder, and a quiet sadness hiding beneath his steady expression. Ethan Cole, 32, was built like someone who'd spent years doing hard labor, but carried himself like someone trained for precision. He moved silently, with a strange mixture of weariness and alertness, like a man who expected danger at any moment. There were stories about men like him all over coastal towns, drifters with secrets. Some healed, some ran, some hunted. Around them, the dockhands whispered, "That's the guy who got out of prison last year. Heard he burned down a boat. No, heard he fought a cop. No way. I heard he used to be military." Rumors shaped him faster than truth ever could. Hannah ignored the whispers. "What experience do you have?" "Fixing engines, loading cargo, maintaining yachts. I don't cause trouble, and I work hard." He paused. "I just need a chance." Lily peered up from behind Hannah, eyes wide with curiosity. And yes, a little crush blooming instantly. Veronica smirked, crossing her arms. "Well, look at that," she murmured. "A walking billboard for protein powder." Ethan stiffened but said nothing. Hannah studied him, noticing the roughness of his hands, the tired posture of someone who'd slept outdoors, and the way he avoided meeting anyone's gaze too long, as if eye contact carried risk. Something in his expression, quiet grief maybe, made her soften. "We could use help," she said. "We're short-staffed for the season." A flicker of relief crossed Ethan's face. "Thank you." He followed her out to the docks for orientation. As they walked, the town's gossip trailed behind them like gulls fighting for scraps. The docks were alive with sound, clanking chains, shouting fishermen, buzzing winches. Ethan jumped in immediately, lifting crates, securing lines, and checking engine leaks with practiced ease. A few feet away, an elderly man carrying a bait box stumbled when a rope coiled under his boot. He slipped toward the water. Before anyone could react, Ethan was there. He caught the man by the arm, steadying him gently. "You okay, sir?" Ethan asked. The old man, Mr. Alder, 70, wrinkled and sunburned but cheerful, nodded gratefully. "Boy, you're quick, thank you." Lily, sitting on a crate tuning her guitar, unknowingly captured the moment on video. Her camera had been recording B-roll for her social media page. She smiled to herself. People didn't always see kindness, but she had. By late afternoon, Harbor Point burned with orange light as the sun dipped lower. Tourists began flooding the boardwalk, and the scent of fried shrimp drifted from the restaurant. But not everything in town tasted like summer. Across the street, a glossy black SUV pulled up. Grant Whitmore's assistant stepped out, delivering yet another letter pressuring the Brooks family to sell their restaurant property. Hannah folded the letter tightly. "We'll fight this," she told her sisters. Veronica rolled her eyes. "You mean we'll lose this? Whitmore always wins." Ethan, quietly passing by with a toolbox, overheard, but said nothing. His jaw tightened. Something about the name Whitmore made his muscles coil. Night fell. Strings of lights blinked to life along the pier, and music from Lily's guitar floated across the water like a soft lullaby. The dinner rush ended, staff clocked out, and one by one the Brooks sisters headed home. Only Ethan remained. He stepped out onto the empty boardwalk, leaning against a weathered post as the sea breathed below. The wind tugged lightly at his shirt, and the reflection of moonlight shimmered on the calm waves. Ethan pulled a battered old phone from his pocket. The screen flickered. A photo loaded slowly, burned edges, soot darkening the frame. A yacht, or what was left of one, exploded, charred, unrecognizable. His throat tightened. "Harbor Point," he whispered, voice barely audible over the tide. "Round 2. The waves answered with a soft, restless hush. The next morning arrived with a heavy, humid stillness, the kind Harbor Point often wore before the afternoon heat tightened its grip. The marina bustled with early activity, tour boats loading passengers, fishermen calling across decks, gulls swooping for scraps. But beneath it all ran a tension Ethan could feel in his bones. Something in the air crackled with quiet warning, like static before a storm. Hannah assigned Ethan to assist with routine mechanical checks for several yachts moored along the premium dock section. One of them, gleaming white with polished chrome rails, bore the embossed lettering, "Whitmore Majesty." It was not the infamous yacht from his past. Those ashes had long settled, but the name alone stirred something uneasy inside him. As Ethan boarded with his toolbox, he caught sight of Grant Whitmore approaching from the pier. Grant, 31, walked with money in his stride, tall, broad-shouldered, hair slicked back so meticulously it glinted under the sun. His tailored navy shirt hugged his athletic build a little too intentionally. To strangers, he looked like the epitome of success. Charismatic smile, neatly groomed stubble, a confidence bordering on charm. But anyone who had worked under him whispered a different story. Manipulative, ruthless, and accustomed to buying silence. Eyes too sharp, smile too perfect, like someone who practiced sincerity in the mirror but never meant it. Ethan kept his head down and began the inspection. The engine room smelled of salt, oil, and something else, something metallic and acrid. He crouched beside the fuel system, running his fingers along the pipes. That's when he froze. The dual-feed fuel line had been altered. Someone had rerouted a secondary line dangerously close to the ignition relay. If heat built up in the wrong chamber, pressure could spike, then a blast, just like before. His pulse thundered. The resemblance to the disaster he carried in his pocket, the one that haunted him every night, was unmistakable. He stepped out of the engine room, jaw clenched. Grant was now standing near the helm, reviewing paperwork with a younger assistant. Mason Hill, 26, a slim man with sandy hair, wire-frame glasses, and a stiff posture of someone afraid to breathe wrong around his boss. Mason's nervousness radiated off him. He triple-checked every page he handed Grant, not out of diligence but fear of making a mistake. Ethan approached. "Grant, you need to see this." Grant didn't look up. "If it's about the rust on the hull again, talk to the maintenance manager." "It's not rust," Ethan said firmly. "Your fuel system's been tampered with. The line's rerouted. It's unstable. If you take this yacht out for a long run, you're risking an ignition surge." Grant finally looked up, annoyance flashing across his face. "You're what? A dockhand and a janitor in one? Since when are you a marine engineer?" Ethan held his ground. "Since I pulled bodies off a burning yacht with the same setup. This isn't normal." Grant laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "That's cute. And what do you want, a medal? Listen, Cole, you're here to carry crates and clean filters. Leave the technical analysis to professionals. I'm telling you, someone did this intentionally. And I'm telling you," Grant stepped forward, lowering his voice, "to keep your head down if you want to keep your job." Mason kept his eyes glued to the documents, pretending not to hear. Ethan stepped back, hands curling into fists. There it was, the confirmation he dreaded. Grant didn't just not care. He wanted to shut him up, and that meant one thing. Harbor Point was hiding something rotten. By midday, news traveled fast. Hannah noticed Ethan working with an unusual tension in his movements. She approached him as he carried a box of spare engine parts across the dock. "You okay?" she asked gently. Ethan hesitated, the weight of truth pressing against the walls he'd built. But the sincerity in her green eyes nudged something inside him. "There's something wrong with Whitmore's yacht," he said. "Dangerously wrong." Hannah's brows knitted. "And Grant doesn't care." Hannah let the information settle. She had spent years reading people, and she recognized honesty when she heard it. "I don't think you're who people say you are," she murmured. "You're not some criminal thug." Ethan's jaw softened just a fraction. "Thanks," he said quietly. Across the pier, Veronica slipped into sight, a sundress flowing around her, sunglasses perched dramatically atop her head, lips painted a bold red. Her eyes tracked the Whitmore majesty with calculated curiosity. Veronica was gorgeous, bold, and dangerously intuitive when she wanted something, and Grant Whitmore was exactly the kind of man she believed could offer the glamorous life she dreamed of. That afternoon, Grant approached her in his usual confident swagger. "Veronica Brooks," he greeted, voice dripping charm. "I'm hosting a private gathering on the Seraphine this weekend. Exclusive guest list. You should come." Veronica smiled, slow, knowing. "And why?" she asked playfully. "Would a man like you want a girl like me at his party?" "Because you stand out in a crowd," Grant replied smoothly, "and I like people who know their worth." It was enough. Veronica's desire to climb higher flickered brightly. From a distance, Ethan watched with cold recognition. People like Grant didn't invite without motive. He'd seen enough manipulation to know the signs. Hours later, as the sun dipped behind the lighthouse, Lily found Ethan near the slips, tuning her guitar. "You look like you're carrying the whole marina on your back," she said with a shy smile. Ethan huffed a soft laugh. "Something like that." "Here," she said, handing him the guitar gently. "Try it." "I don't play." "But you used to," Lily said, eyes bright but cautious. "Your hands, the way you reacted earlier. People who've never played don't hold a guitar like that." Ethan stared at her, surprised, impressed. She had a quiet intuition masked by gentleness. He strummed a chord, then another. His fingers moved with muscle memory he thought he'd buried. Lily sat beside him on the dock. "You were a firefighter, weren't you?" she whispered. He went still. "I saw the burn scars," she continued softly, "on your shoulder. They weren't from fighting or prison or whatever people think." Ethan swallowed. "I was part of a rescue crew. There was an explosion. People died, and someone blamed me." He exhaled slowly. "I've been trying to outrun it ever since." Lily's eyes softened with something like admiration. "That's not who you are." Before Ethan could respond, a shadow approached, an elderly security guard wearing a faded cap and limping slightly from an old injury. Raymond Keller, 68, had worked the docks for decades. Gruff but deeply observant, he had a wiry frame, leathery brown skin from sun exposure, and a habit of rubbing his thumb against his belt when nervous. He'd seen Harbor Point change, and not for the better. He leaned close to Ethan, voice raspy. "Kid," he muttered, "I heard what you told Whitmore. You're right. That yacht's been tampered with. Same thing happened last year. Records were buried, and those who asked questions," he tapped his own chest, "didn't stay safe long." Ethan's blood ran cold. "You're saying it wasn't an accident?" Raymond shook his head. "Watch your back. They don't like loose threads." Then he walked away, slow and limping, leaving the warning hanging heavy in the evening air. Ethan stared out at the water again, the sky burning orange as if reflecting the explosion that haunted his past. Now he knew for certain. The fire that started last year hadn't burned out. It had only been waiting. The night of the party arrived wrapped in velvet darkness. The ocean calm as a pane of midnight glass. Harbor Point glittered with lights strung across waterfront patios, but nothing shone brighter than the massive yacht anchored at the VIP dock, the Seraphine. With 3 decks, mirrored railings, and soft uplighting glowing along its hull, it looked more like a floating palace than a boat. Guests in the designer outfits streamed up the gangway, laughing, greeting, posing for photos against the backdrop of the moonlit sea. Veronica arrived first, stepping onto the yacht with practiced elegance. She wore a gold satin dress that clung to her curves, her dark hair curled in perfect waves. As she moved, heads turned, not because she tried too hard, but because she had the magnetic presence of someone who knew exactly how beautiful she was. Beside her, Grant Whitmore placed a hand lightly on her back, guiding her forward. His smile was smooth and polished, but his eyes flicked constantly from person to person, scanning the room for opportunities, deals, leverage. Hannah came next, not in evening wear, but in a simple navy dress suitable for a restaurant owner supplying the event. She carried a clipboard and kept her hair pinned neatly, hoping to be overlooked among the wealthy elite. Hannah disliked these functions. Too much perfume, too many masks behind smiles. But the Whitmore Corporation was a major client for seafood catering, and she needed to maintain the relationship if she wanted the restaurant to survive. Lily followed her sisters, guitar strapped gently across her back. She wore a flowing cream dress and soft makeup, her blonde hair braided with tiny pearl pins. She embodied innocence without trying. Tonight, she'd been hired as live entertainment, the girl with the angelic voice that always quieted a room. She stepped onto the yacht nervously, stroking the neck of her guitar for comfort. Ethan boarded last, through the staff entrance, carrying a toolbox. As the assigned engine technician for the evening, he wore dark work pants and a fitted black shirt that made him look more imposing than formal. The shadows seemed to cling to him, and even among crew members he stood out. A few staff eyed him curiously, whispering about the new guy, but he ignored them. His focus was razor sharp. Ever since discovering the fuel line tampering on the other yacht, every Whitmore vessel felt like a ticking warning. Half an hour into the party, the deck buzzed with affluent chatter, champagne bubbles rising in crystal flutes. A jazz quartet played softly, and servers carried trays of oysters from the Brooks restaurant. Hannah checked her inventory list while Lily set up her guitar on a raised platform near the stairs. Veronica, however, stayed close to Grant's side. He introduced her to wealthy donors, investors, vacation home moguls, people Veronica had spent her whole life wanting to stand among. She smiled easily, said the right compliments, laughed with just the right pitch. Grant watched her with appreciation. She fit this world effortlessly. In the engine room below, Ethan knelt beside the main fuel chamber. The low hum of machinery filled the narrow space. He expected minor maintenance, but the moment he opened the relay panel, his heart stopped. There it was, a timer device, small, black, taped to the ignition control box. A faint red light blinked with steady rhythm. He leaned closer. The timer read 1943. He froze. Whoever planted it hadn't even bothered to hide it well. Maybe they didn't expect anyone to look here tonight. Ethan's breath hardened. This wasn't an accident waiting to happen. It was a deliberate setup. He bolted from the room, heart pounding, the image of the burned yacht in his phone burning through his memory. He sprinted up the metal stairs toward the main deck. The music grew louder, the chatter sharper. He found Hannah first, near the buffet table. "Hannah," he whispered urgently, gripping her arm. She startled. "Ethan? What?" "This yacht will explode in less than 20 minutes. He said quietly but firmly. "You need to listen to me." Fear flickered in her eyes. She had seen enough truth in him already to believe he wouldn't joke about something like this. "Oh, God," she murmured, her voice trembling. "What do we do?" Before he could answer, his attention snapped toward Veronica and Grant. Grant had his hand on Veronica's waist, leaning close to whisper into her ear. Something he said made her go rigid, her smile falter. Veronica pulled back slowly, eyes narrowing. What he whispered was short, but devastating. "I can get you that bar you want, front line, prime location, but I need you to convince your sisters to sell the restaurant. Do that, and you'll never have to serve seafood again." The world around Veronica blurred. Her dream dangled in front of her, within reach, but the cost was her family. Her breath sharpened. She felt Grant's grip tighten on her hip. Ethan stepped between the crowd, leaning close to Hannah again. "We have 19 minutes. Transitioning quickly, Hannah inhaled sharply. "I'll help," she said. "Just don't panic the guests yet." Lily approached them, sensing tension. Ethan grabbed her elbow gently. "Lily, I need your help. We need to move people toward the lifeboat area, quietly." Lily's pulse spiked, but her voice stayed surprisingly steady. "How?" "Play something loud," Ethan said. "Loud enough that people have to lean away from the edges of the deck, and use the mic. Guide them toward the starboard rail." Lily nodded, her gentle fear turning into bravery. She climbed onto her platform, plugged in her guitar, and struck the opening chord so hard the speakers vibrated. The sound was bright, exhilarating, and loud enough that guests instinctively drifted toward the central deck area, closer to the lifeboats. Meanwhile, Hannah stumbled theatrically toward a cluster of staff members. "Oh, gosh," she slurred convincingly. "It's so stuffy down there. Could someone open all the lower deck windows? Please? I just need air." Two waiters hurried to comply, heading toward the stairwell. They didn't know it, but Hannah had just reduced the blast pressure risk by half. Veronica, still shaken from Grant's whispered deal, moved away from him under the pretense of fixing her makeup. Her curiosity and a sudden spike of dread pulled her downstairs. She descended into the quieter corridors and entered the engine level, her heels clicking sharply. She had no idea what she was looking for. Then she saw it, the blinking device, and beside it, Grant's phone sitting on a nearby crate, the screen still open to an email thread titled "Insurance Payout Agreement." Her stomach dropped. It wasn't just a scheme, it was a crime. She snatched the phone, took rapid photos of the email and bomb device, and shoved everything back exactly where she found them. Her heart hammered like a piston. Footsteps echoed. She fled back toward the stairs. Above deck, Lily raised her voice. "Everyone, come closer. The view on this side is amazing." She pointed toward the starboard rail where the lifeboats sat neatly aligned. The crowd, curious and buzzed with champagne, drifted obediently. Ethan reached Hannah again. 15 minutes, he whispered. Veronica rushed toward them, eyes wild. "You were right," she hissed to Ethan. "Grant, he's behind something. I saw—" "We don't have time," Ethan cut her off. "Stay close to your sisters." Veronica clenched her jaw, torn between rage, humiliation, and dawning fear. But she didn't argue. The clock was ticking. The Seraphine glided across the water, graceful and doomed. The minutes that followed unfolded in a blur of fear and frantic motion. The countdown Ethan had memorized in his mind hammered with every passing second. While guests enjoyed the soft music and ocean breeze, Ethan and Lily hurried toward the lower deck, where the metal groans of the engine room vibrated faintly through the walls. Lily held her breath as she followed Ethan, clutching the railing tightly. When they reached the bomb device, Ethan knelt beside it. His fingers moved fast, scanning wires and trying to identify the trigger. The timer blinked mercilessly. 05:12. There wasn't enough time. The device was complex, too complex to disarm without risking detonation. Lily trembled behind him. "Can you stop it?" "No," Ethan said, voice low, "but we can get people off this boat." They ran back upstairs. The air was thick with perfume, laughter, clinking glasses. No one knew their lives were measured in minutes. Hannah was still directing staff, her hands shaking as she tried to look normal. Veronica stood near the bar, clutching her purse with the evidence inside, face pale as moonlight. Ethan whispered to both sisters as he passed. 5 minutes. Get everyone off. Now." From the band corner, Lily grabbed her microphone and spoke quickly between song chords. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you want the best view of the meteor shower tonight, please gather by the starboard deck near the emergency boats." She struck a loud, echoing chord, disguising the urgency in her voice. Guests murmured excitedly. "Meteor shower? Tonight? Really?" People drifted toward the lifeboats. Hannah stumbled into a waiter, Miguel Rojas, a short, sturdy man with deep brown eyes and an easy smile. He was in his mid-30s with rolled-up sleeves revealing a tattoo of a dove on his forearm. He worked extra shifts to support his elderly mother. Hannah grabbed his arm. "Miguel, help me guide people outside. Something's wrong." Miguel didn't hesitate. He trusted Hannah completely. She once paid for his mother's medication when insurance fell short. He nodded and began directing guests calmly toward the exits. Meanwhile, Veronica stood frozen, torn between instinct and ambition. Her dream life, glamour, wealth, influence, sat just a few feet away in Grant's orbit. But the evidence in her phone proved he had manipulated her, lied to her, and endangered everyone. She hesitated too long. Ethan grabbed her wrist. "Move or die," he warned. Veronica snapped out of it and followed. On the upper deck, Grant laughed with his elite friends, unaware, or pretending to be unaware, of the Exodus foreman. When he finally noticed, he approached Hannah sharply. "What is this? Who told you to move my guests?" Hannah stared at him with uncharacteristic steel. "We're leaving." Grant scoffed. "You don't give orders on my boat." The words barely left his mouth when the timer hit 0. A thunderous roar split the night. A bloom of fire erupted from the lower deck. The explosion sent shock waves through the Seraphine, shattering windows, throwing glasses into the air like crystal shrapnel. Heat blasted across the yacht as flames clawed upward, lighting the Harbor Point coastline in violent orange. Screams filled the night. Ethan pulled Lily down to the deck, shielding her with his body. Hannah grabbed a terrified couple, ushering them toward the lifeboats. Veronica, shaking uncontrollably, helped Miguel lower a raft while tears streaked her makeup. They managed to release 3 lifeboats before the flames spread uncontrollably. More than half the guests jumped aboard or were pushed into the rafts. Ethan dove into the water with 2 unconscious passengers strapped to life vests. Hannah threw ropes. Lily helped pull people out from the lower ledge. Veronica guided a frightened child through smoke and onto a raft. Within minutes, the Seraphine, a shining icon of wealth, became a flaming carcass sinking into black water. The night swallowed the screams. The fire swallowed everything else. By midnight, the Seraphine was gone. Morning arrived cold and gray. Fog clung to the water, and reporters swarmed the docks like aggressive birds. Cameras flashed. Headlines blared across every news station. Brooks sisters and unknown dockhand under investigation in yacht explosion. Former firefighter turned suspect. Family in debt. Motive for arson. Grant Whitmore emerged dramatically from a black SUV. Fake grief plastered across his face. He wrapped a gray coat around himself as flashing cameras framed him like a martyr. "I can't believe this happened," he said solemnly. "And to learn that my own yacht crew included a dangerous man with a criminal past?" He shook his head. "Ethan Cole sabotaged my property out of revenge, and the Brooks sisters, well, they were struggling financially. You connect the dots." The crowd murmured. The reporters nodded like sheep. Police officers stepped forward. Detective Marla Hayes, a tall, stern woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair and sharp features, led the charge. She was known for her rigorous methodology and her deep disapproval of chaos. Years earlier, she lost her son to a boating accident caused by a drunk captain. Since then, she despised negligence on the water, making her stricter and more unforgiving. "Ethan Cole, Hannah Brooks," she said firmly. "You're coming with us for questioning." Lily grabbed Hannah's hand. "Wait," She saved people. Detective Hayes raised her palm sharply. Miss, step back. Veronica stood silent, fists tight at her sides. She had the evidence, but handing it over meant burning the bridge to wealth forever. Ethan didn't resist. He looked at Hannah and said softly, "It's okay." Hannah nodded, face pale but composed. They were escorted to the Harbor Point police station, cameras flashing wildly. Lily and Veronica followed behind, hearts pounding. Inside the interrogation room, Ethan sat across from Detective Hayes. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The smell of coffee and paper files filled the room. "Start talking," Hayes demanded. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Last year, there was another explosion on a Whitmore yacht. I was part of the rescue team. I found signs of tampering, same as last night. I reported it. Next day, I was fired. The report disappeared. They said I caused the accident." His voice tightened. "2 people died, and they pinned it on me." Detective Hayes paused, not convinced, but affected. Meanwhile, Lily sat in the waiting area, phone shaking in her hands. She quietly opened her storage drive and began saving everything she could. Her live stream footage, background audio files, Miguel's accidental recordings of crowd noise, camera angles from the restaurant's dock security, even clips fans tagged her in overnight. Every second counted. Veronica stood near the window, staring at her reflection. Her face looked foreign, fearful, guilty, conflicted. In her bag sat the photos of the bomb and insurance email. She touched the zipper, froze, then let go. Her ambition poisoned her conscience. If she released the evidence, Grant would turn against her completely. She would lose everything she worked for in the shadows. But if she didn't, her sisters might lose their lives. The storm clouds that had gathered above Harbor Point that morning drifted slowly east, leaving behind a tense, eerie stillness. It was the kind of quiet that felt like something was listening, waiting. The police station doorway buzzed with reporters, officers, and murmuring residents, but inside the brick building, the atmosphere was colder than the sea breeze outside. Lily Brooks stood in the hallway with a determination that didn't match her gentle appearance. Her small frame, soft blonde hair, blue eyes, and quiet posture usually made people underestimate her. But tonight, something inside her had crystallized into resolve. She marched straight to the visitor's room where Veronica sat alone, arms crossed tight, staring at the wall. Veronica looked stunning even in stress. Dark waves of hair falling unevenly around her shoulders, mascara smudged at the edges from hours of anxiety. Her beauty usually came with confidence, but tonight her expression wavered between guilt and fear. She had lived her whole life chasing a future built on wealth and independence, afraid of sinking back into the fragile, insecure girl she once was. Lily closed the door behind her. "V, enough?" Veronica didn't look up. "Lily, I don't want to talk." But Lily stepped forward, voice trembling yet forceful. "You have to choose. Either we face this together, or we drown with Grant." Those words cut through Veronica like a blade. She looked up finally, eyes glossy, jaw tight. "You think it's that simple?" "It is," Lily whispered, "because you know what he did." Veronica's breath faltered. For years, she had been taught by her mother that survival meant aligning with power, that love was weakness and money was safety. But everything she thought she wanted now tasted like poison. A knock interrupted them. Officer Clara Jensen, a young police aide with copper hair and freckles, peeked inside. Clara was 24, petite with nervous energy, but known around the station for being earnest and compassionate. "You too? Someone wants to see you." Waiting outside was Marcus Hale. Marcus was in his early 30s, tall with a lean frame and tousled black hair. His sharp brown eyes missed nothing. They held quiet intelligence and a simmering suspicion he rarely voiced. He wore a simple gray shirt and badge clipped to his belt rather than the full uniform. He hated how the stiff collar made him feel trapped. Marcus had joined Harbor Point Police after witnessing how corruption swallowed his father's marina years ago, so he dedicated his career to exposing exploitation, especially from powerful families like the Whitmores. He motioned for Lily and Veronica to follow. "Walk with me, quickly." They moved into an empty conference room where Marcus closed the blinds and dimmed the lights. "I've suspected Grant Whitmore for years," he began. "Financial tampering, insurance fraud, under-the-table payouts, but your evidence, if real, could open a legal breach wide enough to finally get him." Lily handed him her phone. "Everything's backed up. Footage from the yacht, audio, background screams, and this." She showed the clip where Ethan warned her seconds before the blast. Marcus's eyes hardened. Veronica pulled out her bag with trembling fingers. "And these." She handed him the photographs, bomb device, email threads, insurance numbers. "Grant made me believe I mattered, but he just wanted leverage. He used everyone." Marcus scanned the images with slow precision, jaw tightening at each frame. "This is enough," he whispered. "Enough to get a judge to sign warrants." At midnight, the three of them quietly met in the parking lot behind the police station. Marcus drove an older, unmarked car, a pale blue sedan with scratches along the sides, the kind of vehicle that blended into any neighborhood. They headed to the home of Judge Evelyn Merritt, the only person Marcus trusted for an emergency warrant. Judge Merritt, in her mid-60s, had silver hair braided neatly behind her shoulders and strong lines around her mouth that suggested both firmness and compassion. She answered the door in a long purple robe, glasses perched on her nose. "Marcus Hale," she said in a measured tone. "This better be worthwhile. I was reviewing case files." Marcus handed her the folder. "Ma'am, this is about the Whitmore case." She flipped through the evidence. Lily's clip, Veronica's photos, timestamps, signatures. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. She said nothing for a long moment, only breathing deeply through her nose, processing every angle. Then she stood taller. "You'll have your warrants," she said, "tonight." Within an hour, subpoenas and search orders were drafted, stamped, and authorized. The next morning, Harbor Point woke to chaos. Police stormed Grant's residence, offices, and storage lockers. They confiscated files, computers, burner phones. At the same time, forensic analysts reviewed the dock footage and traced foul play in the yacht's engineering logs. A bomb disposal expert confirmed the explosion was intentional. By noon, an emergency hearing began at the courthouse. Inside the courtroom, paneled wood, polished floors, and sunlight streaking through dusty windows, Hannah and Ethan were escorted to the defense table. Hannah looked tired but resolute. Ethan looked like a man carrying the weight of the past and the fear of repeating it. Lily sat behind them, hands clasped tight. Veronica sat beside her, legs crossed but foot tapping anxiously. Marcus presented the compiled evidence, text messages from Grant instructing a technician to adjust the relay wiring for a payout opportunity. Photos Veronica captured of the bomb device and insurance agreement. A voice recording. Veronica had taken it weeks ago when Grant bragged at a dinner party that insurance money always pays double if you know how to play the system. Lily's clip showing Ethan warning her moments before the blast, proving he acted to save lives. Miguel's accidental background recording where Ethan shouted at staff to move guests upstairs. Grant's attorney tried to object, but Judge Merritt silenced him. "Sit down." Evidence after evidence piled up like bricks forming a dam. Finally, Judge Merritt ruled. Hannah Brooks and Ethan Cole are to be released immediately. There is insufficient evidence for their detainment. She turned her gaze sharply. A warrant is issued for the arrest of Grant Whitmore. Gasps filled the room. Veronica closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks, not of fear, but relief. Lily exhaled shakily. Overnight, her clip had gone viral online. People called her brave, a hero, an angel musician who tried to save dozens. She felt overwhelmed, but also stronger than ever. Outside the courtroom, the day warmed, the ocean breeze returning softly. Ethan and Hannah stepped into the sunlight, free at last. Hannah touched his shoulder gently. "I'm glad you're safe." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, vulnerability flickering in his eyes. "I thought I'd lost everything again." "You didn't," she whispered. They sat at the edge of the pier later that afternoon, watching waves slap against wooden posts. For the first time, Ethan spoke openly about the fear he'd carried, the fear of losing those he cared for. Hannah listened quietly, her presence steady as the tide. And somewhere inside him, something heavy finally began to lift. 3 months passed, and Harbor Point slowly returned to the gentle rhythm it once knew. The sea breeze no longer carried the tension of whispered danger. Instead, it hummed with renewal. The trial of Grant Whitmore had shaken the town to its core, but the verdict, guilty on all counts, felt like a cleansing tide washing away years of fear and corruption. With the Whitmore empire forced to surrender assets, including their prized marina, Harbor Point finally belonged to its people again. The morning after the sentencing, the town council announced the creation of a new community initiative, the Harbor Point Rescue and Relief Fund. Designed to support emergency response, water safety, and disaster preparedness, the fund symbolized a new chapter of unity. Ethan Cole was approached immediately. Ethan, now trimming his hair shorter and carrying himself with steadier purpose, had grown into something more than the mysterious dockhand with a haunted past. His broad shoulders still bore old scars, but his gaze, once shadowed by guilt, held new clarity. The council chairman, Howard Greer, a heavy-set man in his 60s with a walrus mustache and a perpetually flushed face, personally asked Ethan to help train the new rescue team. "We need someone who's lived it," Greer said, wiping sweat from his brow as they stood on the refurbished dock. "Someone who understands fire, water, and crisis better than anyone here. The town trusts you." Ethan hesitated, feeling the weight of responsibility. But then he saw Hannah across the boardwalk, laughing softly with Lily as they carried crates of fresh vegetables into their newly renovated space. That sight grounded him. "I'll do it," he said quietly. The Brooks sisters had transformed their inheritance, pain, loss, and a near-death ordeal, into something remarkable. Hannah and Ethan worked day and night on Brooks by the Bay Reborn, redesigning the old restaurant into a dual-purpose space. Part dining area, part emergency relief station, the building now had a first aid training corner, emergency water gear volunteer sign-up boards, and small lockers holding rescue kits. The outside still smelled faintly of cedar and grilled seafood, but the energy inside hummed with purpose. Hannah managed the kitchen and operations with her dependable grace, while Ethan installed new safety equipment, fixed broken fixtures, and occasionally cooked when Hannah teased him into helping. Their partnership, once uncertain, had grown into something deep and unspoken. He admired her patience. She admired his quiet strength. They had become each other's anchor. Lily, meanwhile, found her own kind of rebirth. Her viral clip from the yacht incident had turned her into a quiet local celebrity. But instead of chasing fame, she grounded herself in the music she loved. Every Friday and Saturday night, she performed acoustic sets on a small stage overlooking the bay. Locals gathered to hear her lilting voice drifting over the water like warm wind. She remained humble, still soft-spoken, still gentle. But now there was confidence beneath the softness. She signed a modest contract with a local arts group that sponsored young musicians. Her dream finally belonged to her, not to fear or self-doubt. Veronica's transformation was the most unexpected and the most beautiful. Using the compensation she legally earned as a whistleblower, Veronica opened the Harbor Point Legal Aid Center, a small but well-equipped office tucked near the municipal library. The center focused on helping laborers, restaurant workers, and low-income families fight exploitation. Veronica, once driven by ambition and glamour, now wore simple blouses, practical shoes, and kept her dark hair in a soft ponytail. She remained stunning. Beauty never left her, but her expression softened, her edges rounded. She had traded manipulation for meaning. One afternoon, a nervous young waitress named Tina Morales, barely 19 with timid brown eyes and shaky hands, entered Veronica's office seeking help against an abusive employer. Veronica guided her with calm assurance, filing documents, explaining her rights. Tina left with relief streaming down her cheeks. Veronica watched her go, a quiet pride swelling inside. She had finally become the kind of woman she respected. The day of the new marina's grand reopening arrived with brilliant weather. The sky was a radiant blue dome, the sun gleaming across the water like spilled gold. The boardwalk was decorated with blue and white flags, children ran with cotton candy, and the Harbor Point band played cheerful melodies near the lighthouse. People gathered in anticipation. At the center of the event stood a small platform overlooking the sea. Ethan, Hannah, Lily, and Veronica stood together, a united front. For a moment, it felt surreal, how far they had come. As the mayor finished his speech about community resilience, Ethan stepped forward. His hands trembled slightly, though the crowd didn't see it. He turned to Hannah. She blinked, surprised, as he reached into his pocket. He lowered himself onto one knee. Gasps rippled through the crowd. From his palm, he revealed a ring. Simple, but unforgettable. The band was crafted from a piece of cleaned, polished steel salvaged from the wreckage of the Seraphine. Ethan had shaped it himself in his spare hours, sanding and smoothing every curve. Hannah pressed both hands to her mouth as tears gathered in her eyes. Ethan's voice was soft but steady. "The night your world exploded, you still believed in me." He swallowed, emotion tightening his throat. "Let me spend the rest of my life proving you were right." The breeze stilled. The world softened into quiet light. Hannah nodded, tears falling freely. "Yes," she whispered, voice breaking. "Yes, Ethan." Lily cried openly, clapping her hands to her face. Veronica laughed through her tears. Fireworks burst overhead, painting the sky with blooming colors: gold, blue, white, mirroring the reflection on the water. Harbor Point glowed with renewal. Justice had been served. Goodness had been rewarded. Evil had been uprooted. And in the heart of it all, the Brooks sisters and Ethan Cole stood strong. Separate paths, one united family. The man, once labeled a drifter, a criminal, an outcast, was now Harbor Point's unlikely hero. In the end, Harbor Point teaches us something simple but powerful. You never truly know the battles a person is fighting or the weight they carry behind their quiet eyes. Sometimes the people the world labels as broken or dangerous are the ones God sends to protect us in our darkest hour. And sometimes the ones who look successful on the outside hide the deepest harm. This story reminds us that choosing kindness, choosing courage, and choosing truth always leads to a better shore. And even when the waves rise and the world feels heavy, God has a way of guiding the right people into our lives at the right moment. If this story touched your heart even a little, please share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment and tell me what part spoke to you most. And if you believe, God still watches over the overlooked, the forgotten, and the misunderstood, write Amen in the comments. Thank you for being here. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe so more people can hear stories of faith, courage, and redemption. May God bless you and protect you wherever life carries you next.